So, good morning, everybody. Hey, any hangouts? I see those nervous smiles there as mine. Well, as you can see there, my name is Edgar Sanchez. I come from Ecuador in South America, a small country in the Pacific side. And today we are talking about how to automate QA, especially regarding web UIs. So before starting, I would like to make a little calisthenics. How many of you are working or have worked in QA in general? Few of you, great. And what about QA automation? Not doing by hand. Everybody, great. Next thing, how many of you have worked with F#? A few, okay. Well, I'll try to use as little F# as possible. I'm not going to do something like Ricardo Terrell did yesterday, which just was mind-blowing. I have to tell you, even that I know a little bit of F#, had a hard time following him, but anyways. So, as I said before, my name is Edgar Sanchez. I work as, I have the title, I have to say, Microsoft Regional Director for Latin America, which sounds like I'm the owner of the empire or something like that. But actually, it's volunteer work. They don't pay me anything for doing this kind of things, unfortunately. And more to the point, I'm a member of the F# Software Foundation that tries to make people use and love the F# language. So this is one aspect, one area in which I think F# shines. And that's why I'm here. So let's get started. This is our agenda. First of all, I show a very quick example of how automated UI testing works with Canopy. Then we'll explore a little bit what's under the hood, what makes this thing tick. And then we'll do a step-by-step tutorial, a kind of hello world thing, but as I said before, step-by-step. Of course, many of you that already have done automation will very quickly see that there are a number of other products and platforms and languages that do the same thing. So it's a good question, what F# and Canopy add to the mix? We want to discuss that. Up to there, we'll go in a hello world way. So then we'll see a more complex example, a more complete example that kind of starts to look like the real life, kind of, okay? And then I end with a real life story about the use of Canopy, and let's see how it goes, okay? So first of all, credit where credit is due. Canopy is a library, a framework made by this guy, Chris Holt, who goes by the name of Left-Handed Goat in Twitter. The left-handed part is kind of obvious, and he's the goat because it was his nickname in high school, so he keeps it. So as I said, kudos to him because he really created a very nice framework. Okay, so this is kind of how Canopy looks like. You write your testing scripts like this. And probably it's very small right here in this font size, but we are going to see it live in a minute. For example, you say you start Chrome or start Firefox or start IE, and then that just pops up a browser. You say things like URL, and then of course a URL. You can do things like this. Search for an element with the ID first name and check whether it's John. Or search for an element with the ID welcome and see if it contains the welcome word. Furthermore, you can say things like in the first name element, put or write the word Juanito, Johnny in Spanish, you know. And so you can see it's a very easy language to follow. No, not that hard. And as you keep executing those lines, of course, the browser executes the orders. It works like a puppet. All right, so how does it look in code? And then start the nice stuff. Here's exactly that code in Visual Studio. And I'm just going to run it so you can see it, just to prove it's true. And oh, the browser started here. Let me show you. And there you go. And as you can see, fields are changing values and things like that. Probably it went a little bit too fast for its own good. So let's run it a little bit more post. I'll just add send here and run it again. Yeah. Yes. And here it comes again. But now, with a little look, you can see how the different elements flash as the tests are being run. This is just to check out we are doing things right on the scripts, nothing more. Okay. And of course, it could seem like a silly trick putting that additional ampersand there, but excuse me. But I'll explain most of these things as the talk goes along. Okay, so as I said before, what you need, first of all, and we'll do that in a minute, is a couple of libraries here. Basically, the Canopy library, and then the WebDriver library from Selenium. Okay, and then, as I said before, we have a number of functions, like the start function here, or the URL function, that pretty much do what they say. Okay. For those of you that doesn't know any of F#, this is just a function call. Just because we are very lazy, we don't use parentheses or semicolons and things like that. But it's a function call. It's a function call with one parameter. This is another function call with an string parameter. This is a little bit more interesting. Actually, this is an operator. As several other languages in F# you can define your own operators, and that's exactly what Chris did. He defined this operator. Actually, it's a function with two parameters. The first parameter is this one, and this is the second parameter. And that equality operator, it's a little bit more clever than it looks like, because as you know, many times when you load a page, it could take time to load. Furthermore, it can have JavaScript in there that takes time to execute. And of course, this is running full speed. So probably you get to this line before the page is totally loaded. By the way, it loads asynchronously the pages. Okay. So this operator, what it does is it probes for the existence of this element, and if it's not there, it waits, and it waits and retries. You can configure how many times it retries and how long it waits before every retry, of course. Okay, and if it definitely fails, it just throws an exception. But as I said before, before it does that, it waits. So as I said, it's very convenient. It's very clever, actually, right? And there are a number of other operators. For example, this operator, again, looks for this element, as I said before, and assigns this value there. And so on and so forth. We got the click operator, the click function, excuse me. And we'll see later that we have a number of other functions and operators available to us. So let's go back for a minute to our slides. Where you are? Here you are. Here we are. Okay. What's under the hood? First of all, it's Selenium. And how many of you are aware or have worked with Selenium? I mean, most everybody. So it's plain old Selenium down there. The only thing that Chris did is to create a new layer over Selenium as Canopy. And he himself says that it's not that big. It's like 2,000 or 3,000 lines of F# code, not more. So in principle, anything that you can do with Selenium, you can do it with Canopy. Exactly the same stuff. Exactly the same stuff. Some of it is going to be really easy, like the URL or the equality operator. Some of them, it's going to take some lines of code. Okay, but as I said before, you can do the same things you can do with Canopy, you can do with this, okay? So let's go ahead and so let's do it step by step. First of all, you have to create a Visual Studio.NET project. You can use classic.NET, or you can use the not so new now .NET Core, and just a console project. We'll do that in a minute. Then you have to install those two packages, Canopy and well, Chrome driver if you're going to work with Chrome, then Gecko driver if you're going to work with Firefox, and etc. Okay, and then put as little code as this one here. So let's give it a try. Let's see where you are, Visual Studio. Here we are. So to start out, file, new project. Oops, where you are? Come on. All right. So as I said before, we create just a console application, and let's call it, I don't know, Hola Canopy. Hello. Okay, let's get started. All right. This is an empty project, and then we add a couple of references here. So let's say install package Canopy, first of all. Okay, there we go. And install package, this long name, Selenium, .WebDriver, oops, yeah, Chrome driver. There we go. Okay, that's it. And finally, code. So just to go a little bit faster, let's just copy this few lines of code, few lines of F# code here. Okay, and replace this ones. Where you are, mouse? Here you are. There we go. Whoops. Okay, so just a short explanation. Open, for those of you that haven't used F# yet, open is just a using statement, and we are just opening this namespace. As many other languages, we have a main function, could be called whatever. The only needed thing is that we have this attribute here, entry point, and it signals that the execution will start right there with that function, excuse me. And then we have Canopy code by itself. Call the start function, we call Chrome, load this page, assign this value in this field, and then click this other HTML element. This is just so we can wait for a minute. And the quit function, what it does is it closes all the open browsers. Mind you, you can open as many instances of Chrome, or a mixture. You can open 3 Firefoxes and 2 Chromes and 1 Internet Explorer, etc., without problem. Okay, and quit will close them all. Or you can assign the result of this to a variable, and then quit specific browsers the way you want. And this is just the classical return 0. As I said before, we are lazy people, so we don't put return. We just put the value there. Okay. So we run it up, and it's starting here, and it's opening Wikipedia and doing the search for my country, the flag and the coat of arms. Would you believe it? This is a steamboat in the middle of the river, and they sent me to draw the whole thing when I was in high school. It made me cringe. Okay. Anyway, so we just press the enter, and everything goes off. So starting this thing, making the hello world thing, is really easy, really fast. Doesn't take that much effort. By the way, if any of you prefer to use Visual Studio Code, the very nice, very lean editor, you can do the very same thing there, no problem, okay? So let's go back to our sites. Details, and actually a lot of details. There are a number of concepts inside Canopy. The first one of them is actions. And actions are instructions you can give to the browser once it's under the control of Canopy. So for this, I'm going to go to the Canopy site itself. Let me bring this up here. Yeah, just make a search for Canopy or left-handed goat, and you will get here. What I did is just to get the started part of it, and let's get the actions. So we already use a start, as some people in F# is fond of creating all those crazy-looking operators. Instead of using start, you can use this funny thing. I never do that, but if you want, and it does the very same thing. Okay, quit, I already excused that. Write, I already excused that. Read is interesting. What this does is to look for this HTML element, read its contents, and put it in a variable. So you can then make all kind of comparisons and your own logic and things like that. And again, read it waits and retries if the element is not there yet. Okay, you don't have to worry about that. Click is obvious. You just click on an element, double click, and control click, and shift click, and right click, and all kinds of clicks. Check, it's used with radio buttons and checkboxes. And check, same thing. This is a nice one, or at least I like it. This is the drag operator. And what it does is it takes this element, drags and drops it into this other element. And when you execute this, actually you see the element drag and drop. So it's very nice to do that kind of tests. I'll come to this again later, but it's funny how sometimes I use this sharp character, and here I'm using a dot. What's the difference? That's selectors. I will expand that in a minute, but as we are here, when you use the sharp operator, what it does, it looks for an element with that ID. For example, the yes ID. When you use the dot operator, it looks for a CSS class. So it's going to look for an element with CSS in progress, for example. Okay? And if there are a number of them, it takes the first one. So probably not good enough. We'll see some more interesting examples later. Hover, that's just that. You drag the element and hover over the other one, but don't drop it. Okay? Element, it's an interesting one because instead of taking the contents of the element, for example, the text inside an input box, it takes the whole input box and do with it whatever you want. Okay? This one is interesting, unreliable element. As said before, all the other actions wait and retry. Unreliable element, don't wait. If it's there, great. If it's not, it just explodes. Okay. For example, if you want to see that as soon as you made a previous statement, the element is already there. That kind of stuff. And you've got a number of other actions that you can do. Okay. So you can just read the documentation, and you'll be fine. Okay. Next thing, selectors, and this is an interesting thing because, of course, pages are really complex and very nested and things like that. So you need all kinds of ways to get to the exact element that you are needing to test. So some examples here using CSS. I already explained the first one using the sharp character, or you using the dot and get a class. You can use nesting. Dot class, dot another class, does exactly that. Inside the parent class looks another class in it, and you can go as deep as you want. This is another interesting one. Oh, and I'm missing the square bracket here. Sorry about that. It looks for a div element which has some attribute with some specific value. Okay, I'm using div as an example there. Actually, you can use any HTML element there without problem. Or you can look for a div, and then inside that div, some class, some CSS class. Okay. What if you've got a number of elements? Usual example is this TD element. It's a table. Probably you've got a number of TDs. You can go to the second element, okay, or the third or the fifth or whatever. Remember, all of these things you put inside strings, so you can assemble your string as you need, which means that actually in your code this can be a variable or inside a loop or something like that. Okay. If you need something more powerful, and these are the kind of things that make me cringe, you can also use Xpath. Okay, the whole Xpath thing. So, how many of you have used Xpath? Just a lot of you. Congratulations. Exactly. Congratulations. I try not to do that because as much as possible, but sometimes there's no other way. By the way, as something I didn't say before, as all Canopy does, as Selenium, is to control a web browser and work with the HTML or DOM elements inside of it. I don't care about the technology or platform in which the page was created. And of course, I don't need the source code at all. Okay? So it's a black box, totally black box testing. And if your application is done in PHP, JSP, Python, or ASP.NET, it's going to work. It's going to work without problem. Okay? So those are selectors, and the next thing is assertions. And assertions is about testing whether the fields indeed have or not the values that we are expecting. So let's go again to this site, and let's see some example of assertions. The first one I already mentioned to you is the double equal operator, and not equal operator, same thing. One interesting thing is, this is again an equal operator, but without retries and waits. So it just immediately tries to see whether there is a value there, and if not, it fails. One of many equals is interesting. Probably you've got a number of elements that has got this CSS class, to-do item. And what we are asking there is at least one of those 2D items has the value by milk? If at least one, this succeeds. If none of them has got it, this fails. Okay? And this is exactly the other way around, no? This succeeds if none of the to-do item classes has got a sell everything inside of it. Contains explains by itself. I just look for this text inside this element. Context insensitive, same thing, but uppercase, lowercase indifference. Okay, not contains. You can count whether we've got 5 to-do items, for example. We can use regex. And again, this is a little bit like Xpath. Really powerful, really dangerous. So again, I try not to use it unless I need it. Unfortunately, there are far many situations where I have to use regex. So you've got the equality regex match and not equality regex match. And there are other examples of assertions. Yeah? You just put these lines inside your scripts and you're there. Okay. Okay, next thing, well, when you do testing, you usually need to do other things about testing above actions and assertions. And let me show you a few examples of that kind of stuff. For example, when you define a number of tests, and in a minute I'll show you how you define a test, you call run, and all the defined tests run, okay? Or you can use run for, and give it a list of browsers in which you want to run your tests. This will run, say you have 10 tests, all of them 10 tests in Chrome, and then in Firefox, and then in Internet Explorer. Okay. When you define a context, actually what you are doing is defining a bag which contains a number of tests. So you can execute all the tests or just the text in a context, or define initial conditions for a context, and then remove resources that the contexts are using, etc. Okay? And for example, you can say this before function. What it does is this is run before every test. This is run after every test. This is run at the end of all tests, and etc. The usual stuff. Okay. So again, as you can see, you've got, this is the funny thing I use with the additional ampersand. And this looks like crazy at the beginning. First you've got a text here, and then this thing, and then fun. Well, of course, here you are just defining a function using a lambda. So we can say we use lambdas for our tests, whatever that means. And this is an operator. And what it does is actually it covers the function with some additional functionality, among other things, giving this name to the test. So in this very easy way, you can give very descriptive names to the functions, because it's just a text. Okay. And this is the other one. Actually, this is another operator, and the layer that covers the function, it's got a delay inside of it. And also, as you saw, it highlights the elements that are being touched. Very nice way of doing this kind of thing. You can skip some tests. For example, if you define this test, but you decide that right now you don't want to execute it, you can just replace the definition like this, and so on and so forth. Okay. So this goes not of course, impossible to teach you all the aspects of Canopy in just 1 hour, by the way. But it will give you an idea of how complete this thing is. Okay. By the way, it's been used for years now. It's in version 2 something, so it's battle tested and very mature. And of course, you can give all kinds of configurations. You can see those also in the documentation. And this is an interesting one. You can do reporting. I just show it quickly. Let me do it again. Where are you? For example, this small example here. Okay. Let me run it. And what I want you to see, something that it's in this other screen. See, this is the console running the example. And as you can see, this is the usual automated QA stuff. What tests are being run, how many are passed, how many fail, etc. This is one way of reporting. But also, and we'll see that in a couple of minutes, you can create this report in a very nice web page. So you can define that kind of stuff. You have a number of options for reporting the results of your test runs. Okay. So, as I said before, that's interesting, but there's a number of platforms that do this. And of course, many of you have done this just with Canopy. Well, excuse me, just with Selenium. So it's a good question, why? Why use Canopy? First of all, it's got a very simple DSL and a specific language for defining your tests. You can vary, my experience, with just a few hours of training, anybody with very low programming skills can start creating scripts and trying them. Okay. This is a more interesting one, and we'll see that you can actually interactively create and try your scripts. You don't have to follow the usual write your code, compile, run cycle. You can execute this line by line in a minute. We'll see that. Furthermore, you've got F#, which means that you can use a full-fledged language when you've got very complex situations that you want to test. Okay? And, of course, you can use the... And actually, it means that you can say you are a functional tester, so you are twice as good. Okay? So let's see what I mean when I say we can do this interactively. Let's go to this other, where you are. I think this guy. Yeah. You see, or simple example. One interesting ability of F# is that you can create this kind of files, scripting files. Let me put this, just learning, for example. These files end in FSX, and these FSX files have two interesting attributes. First of all, the code you put there, you can execute it immediately, line by line, first thing. Second, this doesn't get in the final executable. So you can have as many and as big files, FSX files as you want. It won't impact at all your executable test, all right? So what kind of things you can do there? Again, let me copy a few lines there. So you don't see me make as many typing mistakes. Okay, let's see. There we go. And remember, we are going to run this line by line. So first of all, this is interesting. We've got of course, in this case, a couple of libraries that we're going to use, a couple of assemblies. And as we are in interactive mode, our instruction does is it reads and loads that library, that assembly, on the fly. Just give an enter. And here we have the F# console, which has loaded this DLL, first of all, the Selenium DLL by itself. And then we're loading Canopy. There we go. There it is. This is a using, as I said before. I remember every line is being executed here. This is something I need when I'm in interactive. And it's to define where the Chrome driver actually is. And here starts the fun thing, actually. If I execute this line, of course, Chrome instance starts. And when I say, for example, this, the URL is loaded. Okay. And the good thing about this is, of course, if you don't like what you're seeing there, you can re-execute it, change a couple of things, and try again, and try again, and try again. So it's very interactive. And we'll do this, of course. And there you go. And if we press enter, the search is done. All right? And finally, of course, we get rid of the Chrome instance. So, and at the beginning, this is very useful. You can just try, as a learning tool, it's excellent. And when you are already working, what you do? I want this to be a function. So all I do is just give a tap here and say, let my test. All right? And this is pretty much it. Once I've got this, I just go to my program, for example, here. Excuse me. There you go. And instead of all this stuff here, I can just call my test. So you go from interactive script to an executable one in a really easy way. Oh, by the way, I need return 0. That's it. And if we run it, we've got our test. So it's pretty easy. And actually, this is an F# ability. It's running there, okay? So let's go back here. Now, of course, as I said at the beginning, this is all very nice, but also hello world. And the kind of tests we do are far more complex than this. So kindly enough, Chris created a site. Let me show you the site, actually. This is where we have it. This is Chris' GitHub site. And as you can see, he's got this Canopy Starter Kit. Canopy Starter Kit, you can just download it, and that's what I did. And this is a pretty complete example of a testing environment, included configurations, reruns, and nicer reporting. Actually, let me show it running. Where you are, my friend. That's Canopy Starter Kit. Canopy examples. I think I didn't open it, so I'll open it right now. Remember, all I did is to download that site, and I'll show you in a minute. Here it is, Canopy Starter Kit. Okay, and it's coming up here. There we go. Okay. This is this guy, that example. Let me run it so you can see what we are talking about. Yeah, come on. Okay. First of all, we've got the data being tested. And second of all, this is a website with a nicer report. You can see how long it took every test, how many tests passed, how many tests failed, the date, etc. And it's also being saved in a database. And all the code that does this stuff is in the is inside this example. So Chris himself recommends that instead of starting from zero, you just download this solution and start adding your own tests here, okay? And also, he's got a lot more of examples about the use of smoke tests and full tests and things like that, okay? And yeah, of course, we have the QA reporting more similar to what we want. Of course, all these can be executed from the command line, which means that it integrates easily with most build tools without problem. Okay, that's with that. Let's go back to our slides, and I'll show you just this working. Okay. Oh, so real story. These girls here are Wendy and Angie. As you can see, they are very young. They are like 19 years old or something like that. And the reason they are here is because they are or my favorite interns. Actually, they come after just one semester in a technical institute that's kind of a community college, a similar thing. So they just did one semester of Java, if I remember correctly. And what we did is we teach them in some 20 hours the very basics of F#. And then a couple of sessions of Canopy. And then they went along creating tests for real applications in your company. I mention this because functional languages in general, and F# is no exception, has this reputation of being really hard things, and you have to know a lot of math and monads and monoids and category theory and all that stuff. And of course, if you know that, the better. But you don't need to know anything of that. If you ask Wendy or Angie what's a monad, they probably don't even know what I'm talking about. But still, they are very effective writing tests and very inexpensive also. And by the way, not so inexpensive. Chris have used Canopy to test very busy websites. For example, dating websites, Match.com, for example. Many of the tests of Match.com are done in Canopy. So again, it's a very mature, very stable platform for doing this kind of things. So I think I'm a little bit ahead of time. One last thing. All that I told you, but in a far more bearable English, you can see it in this place, in this video by Chris. All I did is to repeat the same things he did here. And so I encourage you to go there. I suppose the guys in the conference are going to publish the slides so you can have access to all this. And it goes without saying, this is an open source project and totally free, so you can use it without paying any license or anything like that, okay? And that's pretty much it. And as we have still a little bit of time, I don't know if you got any questions.
Do you have any examples using page objects instead of the selectors, the explicit selectors in the tag?
What do you mean by data objects?
So a page object is where you would group all your selectors into one class or function, and then your test would call that.
Let me check out and we'll see later, but I know what you mean. I think we can do that. There was another question here.
Yeah, have you done this in like VSTS, like Visual Studio Team Services?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that all the tests are run in a backend server, and all we see is just the results in web pages. Yeah. So you can do that totally. Yes, sir. Any other question? So great. Thank you very much, and thank you for bearing with my English, and start using F#, start using Canopy. Thank you.